So, latest show of cleverness. Big board, it's part of the backplane for a system. All of these connectors, they match the silk screen. Pinouts backwards. I get to remove all of them, because I'm intelligent. So, ha! So there we have a nice, so that is a cleanly desoldered. The first few joints I took out, the desoldering gun hadn't heated up fully, so the solder didn't clean out entirely, but you just kind of wiggle the part a little bit and look at the pins that are flexing and you can figure out which ones have not been removed. So, you know, there's one of 5. Ha! Brilliant. So this is my little fume extractor. There's a big blower up on the ceiling that just circulates it around the room, but it gets it out of my face. So the trick is you put it on there and you let it heat up until it liquefies through, and then you vacuum and you kind of jiggle. And what that does is that wiggles the pin around so that there's no area where there's solder caught between the pin and the wall. You apply it, kind of jiggle a little bit to make sure that it's liquefied, vacuum, and kind of stir. So the idea is basically the pin's poking through the hole, but it's probably leaning against one side. So if you then pull a vacuum on it, it'll clear the solder out from here, but there'll still be a film of solder between the pin and the connection. So by wiggling it around, you kind of let the vacuum pull the solder out from between the pin and the areas where a silver extension would otherwise hold it. So you kind of got to wiggle it around a little bit. Vaguely inappropriate looking. So obviously I just clogged up the tip, and you need a piece of, like, generally stiff, this is steel, just baling wire, and you just shove it in there because it jams up with solder oxide. Fortunately, since I think that clogged up a while ago, a lot of these desoldered joints are not very thoroughly desoldered. So these two are the ones that I just flipped out and pulled over, and they're just sitting in here. So these two are the ones that are on the right way, though you can actually see that the holes don't quite line up. So, check your footprints, damn it! Because I am stupid. So, yeah, I feel clever. Anyways, on to the next 3. So if you listen carefully, you can actually hear the suction pull the solder up from the other side. It kind of makes a wet, sucking noise. So I like the fume extractor, but I'm actually not using it because I can listen to it better and determine whether or not I think I've cleared the hole out entirely or not. So the other thing you can do is you can check whether the orifice is clean by pulling the trigger, and you can hear the vacuum kind of bleed down from the chamber. And actually the duration it takes tells you something about how open the whole opening is. See, you can tell I just cleaned out the board because that just fell right out. That's what it's supposed to be like. So for these first two, the tip was a little occluded, and as a result it couldn't pull as much suction, and it didn't work as effectively. So what I think I'll actually do is I'm wearing pants. There we are. Just making sure it's clear. Alright, yeah, I'm back in the groove. Takes me a while to get the precise timing muscle memory going. But once you get there, I mean, look, that just fell right out of the board. And the nice thing is that this is, you know, I don't need to buy new connectors. These connectors are still completely usable. I mean, look, the pins are perfect. So these first two were kind of getting in the groove of desoldering. Much better. So it's you can hear the suction bleeding down from the reservoir in here, and by listening to the duration you can tell how obscured the vacuum hose is. So I cleaned these solder joints with some Q-tips with some acetone and methanol and ethanol. Acetone and methanol, not methanol and nathanol. So I tried a bunch of flux cleaners at one point, and wound up finding one. It was in a can, like a spray flux cleaner that I liked. Looked it up, and you just find the stuff on the MSDS that you know, the active ingredient. And you know, in this case, it was just half methanol, or it was methanol and acetone. I don't know the proportion. So I'm fortunate in that I work out at the university for most of the places where I'm doing lots of soldering. So you just go down to the storeroom and pick up a gallon of gallon of methanol and a gallon of acetone, and then you just mix it half and half, and just like flush your boards with it. Be careful. You put gloves on because you can do nasty stuff to yourself with methanol through. You have to be careful with methanol when wearing, you know, because it'll seep into your skin. It's not that bad in, you know, just incidental contact isn't that bad. You know, as usual, like acetone is pretty much not a problem at all. I mean, shit, there's some of that as part of your normal metabolism. And if acetone was dangerous, every woman ever who uses fingernail remover would be dead all over the couch or wherever they take off their fingernail polish. Because fingernail polish remover is literally just acetone with perfume in it. But I find the best way to get flux, especially like some of the stickier flux from, you know, solder, is you flush the board with, you know, acetone and methanol. You scrub it with like a horsehair brush or a pig hair brush. You notice it's basically a soft bristle brush. And you flush it with water, and then you flush it again with acetone, and then you flush it again with water. Because the issue is when you scrub it with a solvent there, the flux dissolves into the solution. And then if after the flux is dissolved into the, whatever you're using to clean it with, if you just dry it off, it'll leave a residue of flux over the surface of the board because the flux will evaporate, the solvent will evaporate off and leave this very thin coating of like white dissolved flux everywhere. So the trick is by alternating solvents, you displace all of your first solvent with the second solvent, in this case water, and then you go back and you displace all of that with the acetone and methanol. And then you flip-flop back and forth, and each one of them displaces each other, and therefore you can be sure that you've cleaned most of the, basically you've removed almost all of the whatever contaminant you had at that point. So, and then you just, I just clean it with I just dry it off with like a compressed air hose. And if you take the time to make sure you don't leave any, flux, any, residue on the board, you can get boards that look like they're perfectly clean. Like really professional looking results just by, being thoroughly flushing it and scrubbing nicely. You kind of got to scrub, like if you're scrubbing a surface mount part like an SOIC, you have to scrub in the right direction so that the bristles get between the pins, but, that's just kind of common sense cleaning. Yep, see, that's what it's supposed to be like. So, let me just put those on like that. I don't think I'm going to fully solder these, but I will probably tack the corners down. So the connectors don't fall off, because if I flip this over it'll go everywhere. You just kind of, there we are. Gotta turn this off. The handle on this has been getting pretty freaking hot. So, kind of unwind the cord on my soldering iron. As I do other stuff, it gets all tucked around other instruments. Get my finger. Where is that? I got the switch on there. Figure out where I put my spool of solder. There's some fine solder. Oh, I took it in the other room. Where is theirs? All right. This isn't as nice as my OKI Metcal soldering iron at work, which is why I'm probably not going to solder the whole thing. Tack the corners. Alright, that's all I'm going to do now. So one of the tricks is if you're, in really good condition, and I can do this with the Metcal iron I have at work, is you take your iron and your soldering iron and you literally just kind of drag down the row of pins. And if you've got it right and you have a good iron, you can solder the whole row of pins in maybe 45 seconds. You need a lot of solder and some stiff solder. And one thing I actually did is, I don't have it here again, it's the stuff I have at work, is I built just a junk old gear motor, and I have a foot pedal, which is just basically a switch. So I built a wire gun for solder, which I did after I was soldering like 200 or 300 dip devices in one afternoon. I'm like, fuck this, I'm gonna go try and figure something more intelligent out. So I have it's just like a pen basically, and some plastic and some clamps, and a funky old gear motor. But you just shove the solder, it just spools off solder, which I just have hanging like on a reel hanger. And it just pulls in through the back and comes out the tip. And it's driven by the foot, and you get, So anyways, it feeds it maybe a couple millimeters a second, you know, about that rate, about the appropriate feeding rate. And it's just really convenient when you need to do just a ridiculously inordinate number of things. You know, this isn't that bad. This is a backplane for a bunch of cards for an instrument. And obviously they haven't decided on where they want to put the cards, so you have power distribution rails up here. And then these are all just breakout pins so that they can swap cards around and figure out what they want to do and wire it into the rest of the system. I kind of pushed hard for an application where I could basically design it so that all the carrier stuff was passed through, but what if we want to change it in the field? Well, then you're not planning right. Whatever. Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of how to use a desoldering gun. You know, this is actually, the handle's getting really, really hot at this point. I'll probably have to turn it off and wait a little while, but there you go. Also, check your footprints.